Welcome to the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition press availability. This will probably be our last one before end of session on Sunday. I'm Alaska Independent Democratic leader Chris Tuck, and joined with me today is Representative Matt Claman from West Anchorage and Representative Sam Kito III from downtown Juneau. On Friday, the House and Senate will meet in joint session, or at least that's what was originally scheduled, to confirm the governor's appointments. Apparently that's been taken off the schedule. We're waiting to see when that gets rescheduled again. And last day of session is scheduled for this Sunday. We're hoping to get out on time. I don't see any reason why we can't get our business done. We're just going to have to move a little bit quicker here in the end. The Senate version of the operating budget and individual pieces of legislation seeks to break public employee labor contracts, something that we're opposed to. The majorities are holding the oil industry harmless while balancing the budget by taking money out of the pockets of hardworking Alaskans and families. And that's, we want to protect the best interest of working families, not just with labor contracts, but just the Alaska's potential and what our budget will do to Alaskans in general. We support the governor in regards to Medicaid expansion, and we are committed to doing everything possible to take advantage of this opportunity before we wrap up session. They asked for a bill. The governor put in a bill. They're asking for reform. We're waiting to see what their ideas of reform are, but we need to have expansion this year. Almost everything that's happened up to now has been as a result of the Republican-led agendas in both the House and the Senate. And we're standing by, ready to go to work, ready to make sure that Alaskans have the opportunities that they expect coming out of this session. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Matt Claman.
Thanks, Chris. I actually want to touch base this morning in particular about the question about a constitutional budget reserve vote. It's pretty interesting because before we even got here this session, people were saying, is there going to be a vote on the constitutional budget reserve to pass a budget this year? And we heard early on in the session, we heard from Gunnar Knapp with the Institute for Social and Economic Research, and he said you're going to need a constitutional budget reserve vote. We've heard repeatedly from David Teal with Legislative Finance, and just last week the House Speaker, Speaker Chennault, agreed that we're going to need a constitutional budget reserve vote. So I think that's coming. I don't think there's any way around that. Just talking a little bit about the constitutional budget reserve, it comes from the Alaska Constitution, Article 9, Section 17, and it was created to bridge the gap in times of fiscal hardship. And it's a provision that actually what it really demands, and why there's a three-quarter vote requirement, is it really requires the legislature to come together. And I think this year the people are really demanding that we come together. The language of that amendment is actually pretty straightforward. An appropriation from the Budget Reserve Fund may be made upon affirmative vote of 3/4 of the members of each house of the legislature. And so that's not one of these joint session deals. It's one in which you've got to have 15 votes in the Senate and 30 votes in the House to be able to come together and use the constitutional budget reserve. And as a kind of a new guy in this body, I look around in the House and I don't see 30 votes yet for a budget. And that means we're really going to have to come together. We have to come together because the public is demanding that not only do we eliminate waste in the budget, but we also don't send the economy into a tailspin, and that three-quarter vote is what really requires us to come together and work in a consensus manner. There's really three parts to the budget that's going to have to pass out, and I'm not a member of the conference committee. I'm talking more kind of from the 30,000-foot level, but there's really three parts. There's the 2016 operating budget, there's the 2016 capital budget, and there's the 2015 supplemental budget to basically get us through the rest of the year. And it's really a total package. The CBR vote is, to get a CBR vote, we're going to need to have agreement on all three parts of that before there's any vote to go into the constitutional budget reserve. A lot of people have asked about kind of what are the key components about any constitutional budget reserve vote. And I think the two critical parts, without getting into the finer details, that is what the conference committee is addressing. Two critical parts are Medicaid expansion, and that there's got to be Medicaid expansion and reform, and continuing our investment in public education. And then I think another topic that we're hearing consistently about is investment in transportation infrastructure, and that's both the state ferry system as well as the highway system. It's just very, very important that we reach consensus as a body, and that's going to take careful work, but it's very doable by the time we are hoping to adjourn on Sunday. Last thing I just want to touch base a little bit, going back to Medicaid expansion. It's pretty interesting because in my district in West Anchorage, kind of on the local level, our constituent surveys are showing about 75% support for Medicaid expansion. And it seems like every week I hear another poll coming out. There's the Republican majority's own poll showed roughly 60% favor Medicaid expansion, 30% oppose it. That's about 2 to 1. I heard this morning that Ivan Moore has a poll out showing 65% of the public supports Medicaid expansion. It's something that is needed. It's going to grow the economy. It's actually a savings for the state. We'll bring more money in than we'll spend. And I think most important, and why there's so much support on a statewide basis, is it's going to increase access to medical care and health care for over 40,000 Alaskans. It's the right thing to do. One of the things my mother always used to tell me about being a good legislature is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we hear a lot of talk about reform. Reform is ongoing. It's been going on for a while, even without expansion. It will continue with expansion. But if we try to say here in the legislature, oh, we can't approve Medicaid expansion unless we've perfected the reform, that's exactly what my mother always used to say. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We really need to get moving with Medicaid expansion. And so those are some of the components. And after Representative Kito has spoken, we'll be happy to answer your questions.
So still, our commitment is to public education, making sure that we have affordable, accessible health care. We want to be able to continue providing opportunities for all Alaskans and have safer communities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Sam Kito.
Thank you, Chris. So I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of the budget items. We're into the conference committee process, and our finance members are actually in finance, and they've been working with the conference committee actively to try and make sure our interests as a state are protected. So on the budget, at least for the southeast area, there are some specific concerns. We've talked before about marine highway system. Marine highway system cuts mean we're going to have service decrements on the Aleutian Chain, in Prince William Sound. The Chiniga, it sounds like, is going to have to be laid up for an entire year. We've got service decreases all throughout Southeast that are going to impact every one of us, actually. We've got 5,900 existing reservations. If we don't have a budget that can actually move those people in July and August, the Department of Transportation is going to be calling or letting those people know that those routes or those sailings aren't available, and they may not have alternative vessels to book on. So we could end up with a lot of people that are planning to come to Alaska. 80% of those reservations are from people out of state that might not come. And then next year, if they want to try and make a plan, are they going to trust that we're going to be able to honor our reservation system that we've actually made for next year if we couldn't do it this year? So there are definite concerns about whether or not we're going to have the ability to make sure we have a viable marine highway system with the level of cuts we've got right now. Cuts to education are a concern, K-12 and early education, and also we saw in the Senate last week, Senate Finance, put a hold on cruise ship head tax money, and that's money that goes out to every one of the Southeast communities, or virtually all the Southeast communities that support cruise ship activities. And if they don't have the ability to get that money, that's going to be more money that's going to have to come out of those municipalities' coffers. And we also have projects that draw out of that fund that are active, construction projects in various phases of construction or design. If we don't have the ability to expend out of that fund, those projects are going to stall. They'll wait, they'll cost more when we can start spending that money again. So there's lots of different issues with the budget that we still have concern about. Also, in respect to tax credits, we had a bill, House Bill 100 yesterday, that increased tax credits, and I think everybody would agree we want to encourage business in the state of Alaska. The one concern I have is if we're encouraging business, do we do it on a business by business aspect? So in this case, everybody talked about it as the Agrium bill. I think Agrium's a wonderful plant. I hope that they're able to make things start, but I do have a concern that we have passed a piece of legislation that appears to only impact that one company and give them a break on taxes for 7 years. And I wish I had a business that could get a break on taxes for 7 years, specifically in legislation. So I do have a concern about whether or not we're doing things that are actually broad-based public support, or if it's going to be very special interest. One of the other items before we get to questions is yesterday we had an issue in Ledge Council where there was a proposal put forward that we look at possibly, again, purchasing the Legislative Information Office downtown. I do have a concern, broad picture concern. We had an opportunity with the Atwood building to be able to move in this year with a cost that was significantly less. Over a period of 10 years, I think the cost estimate for Atwood building lease rates was $11 million, whereas the lease that we are paying is going to cost us $88 million over that same period of time. So tens of millions of dollars over the next 10 years could be saved by us co-locating with the state office, and I think that's it is still on the table, but I am concerned that the other item on the table, which is a purchase of the new LIO, was already looked at last year, and the deal that was brought back to us was not something that we could agree with. We hear that the land is back on the table, which is good, but I also think that if we purchase the building, we're still going to be, as a legislature, living or housed in one of the nicest buildings in downtown Anchorage. And I'm concerned that if we are trying to set an example to be frugal, to try and make sure that we can live within our means, then the legislature also has to be doing the same thing. So with that, I think we can open it up to questions.
Questions?
Becky Bohr with the Associated Press. On the issue of education cuts, there's a number of different changes that were made with pre-K, with the 2016 money, with the one-time money, with not forward funding. What specifically do you see needs to be addressed to be comfortable with supporting the budget?
One of the best investments that we can make is in public education. And when we look at public education, pre-K is a big, important component of that. One of the most cost-effective ways of coming up with the pre-K program is the Parents as Teachers program. You know, it reaches to rural Alaska. You don't have to have classroom space for it. And it's really getting parental involvement early on in a child's learning career. And as you get parents involved early, then they tend to stay involved. And that's one of the key components to a successful public education system is parental involvement. So that's one of the best investments that we can make. We want to make sure that Alaska has a vibrant, strong economy, and investing in public education is a priority for us.
Does that include all of those, or, I mean, the governor did not include the one-time money that was approved last year? I guess, would you accept any cuts, or what would it take, I guess, for you to be comfortable with supporting budget?
So I guess from my perspective, talking about specific numbers at this point is probably not the most productive way to move forward. The bigger issue we need to look at is how are we preparing our children for school, pre-K? How are we preparing our students for the workforce, which is K-12, vocational training, and university? And do we have a budget package that actually ends up getting us there? In 10 years, we hope to have a gas line. If we are building a gas line, I hope that people that are going to school right now are able to get out of school and go to work. If we cut too much out of pre-K or early childhood education, if we don't adequately support our K-12, then we're going to be struggling, I think, to find adequate people to be able to go to work for building the gas line. So I think it's all of those components need to be considered. We can't just say this is important, this is not important. As we're looking at the budget, we need to say, is this a budget that's going to move Alaska forward? And when we're looking at moving Alaska forward, it means all the way from pre-K all the way up to the university, and then try to figure out what package best does that.
Rhonda McBride, KTVA. I'd like, if it's possible, to speculate about some end-of-session scenarios. I mean, you mentioned that the confirmation hearings have been pushed back. You mentioned, the constitutional budget reserve issues. So here's scenario number one. governor vetoes the bill, HB 132, on Saturday. So what do you see happening?
That's a very good question, and it has to do with how the majority wants to react to that. We've expressed our, by our vote on House Bill 132 originally, where we sit on that. We don't want to strap the governor's hands in negotiations. We want to make sure that he has the most bargaining strength that he can go into while he's negotiating on behalf of Alaskans. And so I don't know where the rest of the majority lies on that. So it all depends on the speaker and where he thinks he has support and doesn't have support. If there's going to be a veto override, or if there's not going to be a veto override, it might be a done deal after the veto. Those are questions that still need to be answered. So we're not sure on that regard.
So let's say that there is a veto and maybe not an override or an override. What happens with the confirmations, which probably would be pushed to Sunday?
Well, then what happens to the confirmations? Then hopefully the governor gets his people confirmed. If we adjourn without the confirmations, then the question is, I believe that the governor will have to start over again with a whole new slate of people. And that's a procedural move that the majorities may be thinking about. I don't know what their intentions are. I know that when we noticed that the joint session was canceled, we had concerns. It sounds like that they said that, well, Friday was just a busy schedule, so we'll reschedule it. So we're standing by, as probably the governor is, and waiting to see what the majorities are going to do.
And then just one final question. If they want to tap your vote for the CBR, is education enough, or does it have to be both education and Medicaid to get you to give you their votes?
Well, it's not going to be education and Medicaid alone. It's going to be Alaska Marine Highway System. It's going to be public media. It's going to be public employees. It's a whole gamut of things that we're going to be looking at. We're going to see how things shape up with the conference committee, and then from there we'll take up to where leftovers are. I mean, where they left off is where we're going to determine where we go next. Representative Kito.
So I think there are going to be lots of pieces as we get towards the end, and there are a lot of things that are getting pushed towards the end. But the three things that we could all watch to make sure that the packages or the pieces we need to go are really a budget that works for Alaska, Medicaid expansion, and making sure that we're with the budget adequately funding education. So we do need and the confirmations. So joint session for confirmations, working on trying to make sure we can get a budget that works for Alaska. And so these are all things that are in Medicaid expansion, all key to trying to make sure that we have a successful end of session by Sunday.
I mean, just to add in, it really is kind of a package deal. It's not any one part of it. It's all three. It's just as it's the continuation of the 2015 operating budget, there's the 2016 operating budget and the 2016 capital budget. All three of those, this body, I think, is going to have to reach consensus on all three of those before I think they can get to 3/4 for a constitutional budget reserve.
Pat Forgey, Alaska Dispatch News. Why do you think Agrium got a specific bill aimed at its industry? And does it have anything to do with the fact that Speaker Chenault's former construction company used to work for Agrium?
That I didn't know, but I do know that that plant is in the Speaker's district, what I said last night is if they need assistance from us, why don't we just do an ADA loan for them? That's an opportunity for us to get money back, but to also lend them a helping hand at the same time, and we're not just giving away unnecessarily. It also gives a chance to look at their books to see if something like this is necessary, see what we need to do to be able to get them the economic advantage to get started, if there is any reason to do so. But I will tell you that we've done a lot in the Cook Inlet already. When we passed House Bill 280 back in 2010, we did primarily three things. The first thing we did is we allowed jackup rigs in the Cook Inlet, which we didn't allow before. We also highly incentivized through tax credits exploration for natural gas. Prior to that, all we did was explore for oil and found natural gas along the way. Now we've actually incentivized for natural gas. And what's unique about Alaska is that, you know, we're a huge geographical state with pockets of oil and gas all over the place. We don't ring fence, meaning that people that have their paying high taxes up on the North Slope due to the oil, that they're able to write all that off from their exploration in the Cook Inlet. We don't tie just the tax credits to the North Slope or tie the tax credits down to Cook Inlet. They can write it off one way or the other. And then we have third-party natural gas storage facility. This is the reason why the LNG plant is looking at reopening, and this is the reason why the Agrium plant is thinking about reopening. The question is why do we need to do more?
Do you know why Agrium didn't pursue ADA? The loan possibility there?
I do not know why they didn't, but I heard rumors that they may have and then had withdrawn after being offered these tax credits. So that's something we need to look into.
Alexander Gutierrez, APRN. So you all described the package you want to see with the CBR, but as of last week, it sounded like there hadn't been much communication between the majority and the minority on these discussions. How do we get there, and are kind of talks underway?
Talks are underway right now. We've been talking with the co-chairs of finance on the House, and so they're going to do what they can. There's a lot of things that we agree on. We do agree that the Senate went way too far on their budget cuts. We agree that public education should be a higher priority, and we agree that broadband is really important, especially when you look at education, telemedicine, economic development, looking at even public media. And so I know the consensus in the House a little bit is that the Senate did cut too deep. We even heard the Speaker say that they went a little bit too far. So we're just going to see how things pan out. We've expressed our desires and what we want to see happen. It's just we'll see how the conference committee comes out and see how far we can get.
So with the cuts being so deep in the Senate, in some ways it's almost pushed you all more in alignment with the House majority than you were at the beginning of session. Do you feel like this has kind of limited your opportunity to maybe push for other things that would have been priorities?
Well, I'd like to say it probably aligned the House majority a little more in line with us. Because if you look at how we voted in our amendments that we made on the operating budget, these are some of the things that we were trying to protect all along. So I see better alignment when we look at that. And what's the second half of your question?
Oh, do you feel like this kind of has limited you from pursuing a separate agenda with the CBR vote that you might have pursued otherwise?
No, not at all. We're still pretty committed to what we want to see happen in the budget. We're just basically waiting to see how this comes out, what package comes out, so we can make modifications from there.
Let me actually give you an example about why I don't think we've been compromised at all. It has been a priority for the Independent Democratic Coalition to get Medicaid expansion. It's the governor's priority to have Medicaid expansion. So if you look at the House budget and you look at the Senate budget, and neither one of those contains Medicaid expansion, well, I think you'll get consensus from everyone in the Independent Democratic Coalition that any kind of an agreement that doesn't include Medicaid expansion is probably not going to get our vote. So we haven't given up anything on Medicaid expansion, even though it still isn't in the budget. I fully expect that Medicaid expansion is going to be the part of any final agreement.
And if Medicaid expansion doesn't happen and there's some sort of impasse, are you concerned that you guys might be sort of labeled obstructionists in a way if things blow up?
Yes.
No, I guess I just say I think we need a budget that works for Alaska. Part of that budget is going to be Medicaid expansion. And if we don't have a budget that works for Alaska, we should keep working until we get one.
And let me say something, that we have not been the obstructionists on this one. On this issue right here, it's the majority that's demanded to have a bill. They have a bill. They want to see reform. Reform's going to come along the way. But we're here to see expansion happen. And we're here to work with the majorities to make expansions happen, but we're not the obstructionists on this one.
And I'll just add one more piece. As Representative Kito says, a budget that works for Alaska, well, the governor has made it very clear that a budget works for Alaska includes Medicaid expansion, and that's not the only thing. He's got a lot of priorities. There's gas pipeline issues. There's a whole range of things that are very important to the governor as well. But the budget works for Alaska is one that can bring the legislature and really 3/4 of the legislature, as the Constitution requires, and the governor, and reach agreement. That's what we'll be able to say. This is a budget that works for Alaska.
Yes, any other questions?
Becky Borth, the Associated Press. Do you know if any members, have you discussed if any of your members have changed their mind and would be able to support any veto override attempt on HB 132?
Not that I'm aware of.
So I know that everybody has a different answer, but you anticipate a special session? And if so, why or why not?
We will, what may lead us into a special session is expansion of Medicaid. It could be any veto overrides, depending on what happens with the next few days. What are some other reasons why we might have extended session? Could be over the interior energy plan. That's something that's really important to people in the Fairbanks area, also important to the governor. What are some other things that public education, of course, is important to us?
A budget, I mean, I think an active, like we've talked about, making sure that we've got a budget. We do, before we adjourn, have to have a budget, but if that budget doesn't work for Alaska, it's very possible that we're back working on a budget as well.
And we're willing to do what it takes to protect the public's best interest. We have a lot of incredible talent and abundance of natural resources into Alaska, and we got to make sure that Alaskans benefit from that and not just outside interests. Any other questions?
Going?
I did have one on expansion. There's been some question. The governor has said his preference would be to go the legislative route, and has sort of indicated there would be other options available, perhaps, if things fall through. Do you get the sense that the majority is dug in deep on the reform piece without expansion? And do you think you could support something if the governor could act unilaterally?
I don't know what the governor's options are if it doesn't take legislative action. I don't know what those are. That's something I'd have to study. I'm sure they've studied it. But it is clear. The public, we have health consortiums. We have municipalities and boroughs passing resolution in support of it. We have business communities. We have chambers of commerce. We have tribal councils and leaders that are coming up out in front of Medicaid expansion. This is something that the public overwhelmingly would like to have. If it goes into some sort of nuclear option and the governor has to go around the legislature, I'm just not sure of what process that is. I don't know if anybody else knows, but
I don't know the process, but again, I think the public, when you look at the polls, you look at not just the polls, but the calls I get to my office, and I think people are getting throughout this building in their office. I think if it sort of becomes one of those processes where you don't see the legislature and the governor coming together for the interests of the state, I think the public's going to be pretty discouraged about that happening. I think the public I think wants this legislature to come together and work with the governor and get a solution that works for Alaska. And I think trying to come up with one action or another without coming together really is not fulfilling our obligation to really serve the public, which is our first priority here in the legislature.
And this is the legislature's opportunity to follow the governor's leadership and do the right thing. This is money coming into the state of Alaska. We're in a huge budget deficit right now. We had a special session underneath Governor Palin to receive federal monies from the energy program, the energy monies that she wasn't willing to accept. And back then, we ended up overriding the governor to make sure that we received those monies, because it does help our economy. Much in the same way, we need to be willing to receive the federal money on this one here to help save the state money, to help bring down the cost of health care, to put Alaskans to work, to have money to give people the health care that they need. I mean, who can be against that, really?
Apparently you weren't here half an hour ago.
No, we weren't here a half hour ago.
Well, not very many bills have been passed this session. So, in those final moments, are there any hopes do you have any hopes pinned on specific bills?
Again, one area that I think, and it's up today, is House Bill 123 regarding the Marijuana Control Board. We've already passed House Bill 79 regarding local options with marijuana, and I think there's a pretty good likelihood that there'll be a marijuana crime bill that'll pass out in the last days. And I think the reason for that is that in light of the voters' initiative, a lot of Alaskans support that initiative, and I think that really is a message to the legislature. You need to get your work done, and so I would expect, although there may be some amendments along the way, I would expect those three parts of the marijuana bill to pass out before we leave the Capitol.
And of course, marijuana. I mean, of course, Medicaid expansion. We would like to see that bill pass through. And then we have Aaron's Law. We would like to see Aaron's Law. That's something that has had overwhelming support, and we have 4 bills on that right now. We should have had that passed a long time ago. I'm glad that we're having some hearings on it, but that's something that we had expected to pass actually last year. And when you look at the number of bills that we've had this year, it's a different feel. This legislative session, we have less bills that are moving, less bills that have been introduced. The fiscal situation right now, we're trying to do things that do not require a fiscal note. We're all realizing the situation that we're faced with, and we even see less ask from the public because the public is aware of our financial situation. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for being here, and we'll see if we have another press availability next week, but we hopefully be able to get our work done by Sunday. Thank you so much.